It was a chilly autumn afternoon when 10-year-old Sarah wandered away from her friends. They had been playing tag at the park while the vibrant leaves crunched beneath their feet. But the moment she spotted a brightly colored balloon drifting away in the wind, her curiosity took over. She hesitated for just a moment, then broke away from the laughter of her friends to chase after it. The balloon danced away from her, teasingly out of reach, and as Sarah sprinted after it, she found herself at the edge of a dark alley. The gas lamps flickered dimly, casting unsettling shadows on the brick walls. With a determined heart, Sarah darted into the alley, her eyes fixed on the rapidly rising balloon. But the balloon climbed higher and higher, leading her to the grating of a storm drain. Instead of turning back, she knelt down, peering into the darkness below. Just a little closer, she thought, trying to catch a glimpse of the mysterious underground world. Before she knew it, Sarah had leaned too far, lost her balance, and fell into the gaping opening. As she tumbled down, the air turned damp and cold, and the sound of the world above muffled into silence. When she landed, she found herself in a narrow tunnel, with water trickling along the uneven floor. The darkness enveloped her, and her heart raced. "Hello," she called, but her voice echoed back at her, a mocking reminder of her solitude. Her first instinct was to climb back up, but the walls of the storm drain were slick and too high. She stood up and took a deep breath, her eyes adjusting slowly to the faint light filtering through the grates above. The air smelled musty, a mix of decaying leaves and something else she couldn't quite place. As she ventured deeper into the tunnel, Sarah spotted the remnants of twisted metal and old, rotting wood. It was then she noticed strange carvings on the tunnel walls, symbols that made her stomach churn with unease, depicting what looked like eyes and mouths screaming in silent terror. The echoes began again, and for a moment she thought she could hear whispers. "Help!" A soft voice echoed through the damp darkness. Her fear was quickly replaced by a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was someone else down here, someone who could guide her back to safety. "Hello," Sarah called again, desperation creeping into her voice. "Is someone there?" The whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a chilling breeze. They seemed to emerge from the very walls, intertwining and creating an almost musical melody, a haunting lullaby that sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly, something moved in the shadows. A figure emerged. It was a boy, older than her, with hollow cheeks and wide, dark eyes that glimmered with a strange light. "You shouldn't be here," he croaked, his voice raspy as if he hadn't spoken in ages. "Please, I need to get out," Sarah exclaimed, her heart pounding wildly. "I fell in. Can you help me?" He looked at her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. "Nobody can help you here. This place, it wants you." Confused, Sarah backed away, but the boy stepped closer, his expression twisting into something almost sad. "I was lost like you once. There are others down here." He gestured into the darkness behind him, and Sarah felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. "What do you mean? Others? Who?" "Children who chased after things they shouldn't have," he replied quietly. "We're trapped. The tunnel feeds on our fear, our loneliness. It will keep you forever. Unless..." "Unless what?" Sarah interrupted, her voice trembling. "Unless you find the way out before the darkness takes you." It was then that Sarah heard it. A low, rumbling growl vibrating through the walls, a sound like 1,000 voices crying in agony. The tunnel seemed to tremble, and the flickering light grew even dimmer. Panic surged through her, and she turned back to him. "How do I get out?" she shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. But the boy only stared at her, an expression of melancholy washing over him. "You have to face it," he murmured. "You have to let go of what you're holding on to." "No," Sarah cried, fear gripping her chest. "I want to go home." The growl echoed again, more violent this time. The tunnel seemed to close in on her, shadows pooling around her like great black hands. She turned her back on the boy and ran down the tunnel, her heart pounding, the whispers growing more frantic as she thrashed through the darkness. "Find the children," they called, the disembodied voices weaving through her thoughts. Their urgency echoed in her mind. As she ran, Sarah stumbled upon a series of doors carved into the tunnel walls, each one marked with the same twisted symbols. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, urging her to explore. She hesitated, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But something drew her in, a warm flicker of light that seeped from beneath one of the doors. Gripping the handle, she opened it. Inside, a dim room aglow with soft light waited, filled with faded photographs of children smiling. The air was thick with memories, but they felt suffocating, coating her skin like a heavy fog. In the back of the room stood an old mirror, its glass tarnished and dusty. She approached it, and the moment she looked in, her reflection shimmered and reformed into the twisted shapes of the children who had come before her. Each face wore a desperate expression, mouths whispering secrets she couldn't comprehend. They were trapped, their eyes pleading for release. The boy's warning echoed in her mind. Let go. In that moment she understood. The darkness took hold of those who clung too fiercely to their fears and sadness. And so, with a trembling gasp, Sarah closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the weight of all she had lost. The friends she had left behind, the laughter and simple joys of her life. When she reopened her eyes, the mirror showed her a bright light, a passage opening behind her. Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over her, as if she had finally freed herself from the shackles of despair. Taking a deep breath, she turned away from the mirror, forced open the door, and found herself back in the tunnel, the boy waiting for her. "You did it," he whispered, his expression softening. "Can I leave now?" she asked. He smiled sadly. "Yes, but remember us." As Sarah ran, the darkness began to recede, the whispers fading behind her. She sprinted towards the light that beckoned her, the world above pulling her back with hunger. In a burst of clarity, she leapt upward, feeling the cool air rush around her. With one final push, she burst through the grate, tumbling out onto the grass of the park. Disoriented, she looked around. Her friends were still playing, blissfully unaware of her absence, but as she turned back, one final whisper curled around her ears. "We'll be here, whenever you need to remember." And in that moment, beneath the surface of bright autumn leaves, she knew the darkness below would always linger, just out of sight, waiting for the day someone else would chase after the light. Sarah never spoke of her adventure, but as the nights grew darker, the echoes of the lost children haunted her dreams, a reminder of the shadows lurking beneath the world she knew. In the quaint town of Eldridge, whispers of a forgotten cellar echoed among the townspeople, tales of what lay beneath the old Garraway house. The house had stood on Frostbite Lane for over a century, its crumbling facade cloaked in ivy and shadow. Many avoided it, the air around it thick with an unsettling aura. It was said that during the mid-1900s, the Garraway family mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind only hushed rumors and a decaying structure. On a chilly autumn evening, a group of 4 friends, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Tom, decided to explore the house, driven by a mix of bravado and curiosity. They were young, fearless, and excited about the chance to uncover a local legend. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they approached the house as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows. The front door creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. Dust motes danced in their flashlight beams, and the air was stale, carrying the scent of mildew and thyme. "This place gives me the creeps," Sarah said, shivering slightly as they stepped inside. Jake, always the thrill-seeker, laughed it off. "Come on, it's just an old house. Let's find that cellar." They made their way through the kitchen where peeling wallpaper and broken dishes littered the floor. The remnants of hurried meals and forgotten laughter seemed to haunt the dark corners of the room. After several minutes of searching, they discovered a trap door in the corner of the living room, partially hidden beneath an old rug. "Here it is," Tom exclaimed, excitement dancing in his eyes. They gathered around, their hearts racing, as Jake grasped the handle and pulled it open. A gust of musty air rushed out, sending goosebumps crawling over their skin. The stairs spiraled down into darkness, the beam of their flashlights barely reaching the first step. "Who goes first?" Emily asked, the tremor in her voice betraying her bravado. After a moment of hesitation, Jake stepped forward. "I'll go. You guys stay close." One by one, they descended into the bowels of the house. The cellar was a vast underground space, damp and cold, with rough stone walls that seemed to close in on them. The air was thick, and the faint echo of dripping water added to the eerie silence. "It's just a cellar," Jake asserted, trying to shake off the growing unease. But something felt off. An oppressive weight hung in the air. As they explored, the flashlight beams illuminated old crates, broken furniture, and strange markings on the walls that appeared to be remnants of a long-forgotten ritual. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she traced her fingers across the symbol, which looked like a twisted figure, barely discernible in the darkness. "Guys, let's get out of here," she urged, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. "It just feels wrong." But the others were focused on a large, ancient-looking chest at the far end of the cellar. "Just a quick look," Tom said, ignoring her. As they approached the chest, a low rumble echoed through the cellar, causing the ground to tremble slightly. The friends paused, a sense of foreboding settling over them. "What was that?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with fear. Tom knelt beside the chest, undeterred. "It's just the house settling. Help me move this." With Jake's help, they pried the heavy lid open. Inside lay a collection of old photographs, each depicting the Garraway family. But what struck them were the expressions on the faces, twisted, contorted, as if frozen in agony. Suddenly, the cellar door slammed shut above, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged through the group as they scrambled for the stairs. "What the hell just happened?" Jake shouted, pounding on the door. But it wouldn't budge. The growling rumble returned, louder now, reverberating through the stone walls. "Look!" Sarah pointed to the far wall, where shadows began to coalesce into shapes, figures that appeared to emerge from the darkness. They were indistinct but undeniably there, watching, waiting. "This isn't happening," she whispered, backing away. The figures began to take form, grotesque and twisted, their eyes glowing faintly. The friends froze, a primal fear locking them in place. One of the figures moved closer, and the overwhelming stench of decay filled the air. It reached out a skeletal hand, and Sarah screamed, breaking the spell. They turned and ran blindly. Jake led the charge back to the chest, hoping to find another way out, but the figures lunged at them, claws scraping against the stone. "We have to find a way out," Emily yelled, her voice rising in terror. "Over here," Tom shouted, spotting a small window near the ceiling of the cellar. They scrambled towards it, pushing against the wall, but the figures were relentless. Just as they reached the window, a cold hand clasped around Jake's ankle, yanking him back. "Help! Please!" he cried, but the others were already pulled through the window, frantically grasping for his hands. "Let him go!" Sarah screamed, her heart breaking as Jake disappeared into the shadows, fading from view. In a desperate surge of adrenaline, she grabbed hold of his arm, pulling with everything she had, while Tom and Emily kicked at the creature holding him. The creature released its grip, and with one last heave, they pulled Jake through the window. They landed on the grass outside, gasping for air, heartbeats pounding in their ears. The cellar door remained shut, the dark shapes inside howling, furious at their escape. Without looking back, the four friends ran, adrenaline propelling them down the street. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of that night lingered in their minds like an unshakable nightmare. They met often, sharing what they could remember, piecing together fragments of the horror they had witnessed. But with each retelling, they found themselves haunted by visions and whispers in the dark. Months later, Jake, unable to forget, returned to the Garraway house alone. Driven by a need for closure, he opened the trapdoor once more, trembling with fear and determination. The cellar was empty, echoing with silence, nothing but the remnants of dust and old shadows. But in the corner, a new shape emerged, a figure watching, waiting for him to join it. The townsfolk say they still see Jake wandering the streets of Eldridge, his eyes hollow and his laughter distant, as if he has become a part of the legend, the boy who stepped into the forgotten cellar and never truly returned. The whispers continue. Some doors should never be opened.